Hello, and thank you for signing up for our conversation today about real wealth, real measurement with Mark Anielski. And this is our first in a series of webcasts that we're going to be doing here at the International Institute for Innovation. We are the Center for Social Responsibility within the Institute, and we're just interested in talking about how to make good happen, how to do social change in a way that makes sense for everyone, and we're going to have a lot of interesting topics, one monthly over the next few months, leading up to our full launch in September, which should be really exciting. But enough about that. Let's talk about today's topic. My guest today is Mark Anielski. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Lee.
And Mark is the author of The Economics of Happiness, this lovely book right here, as well as a member of Genuine Wealth. You said Genuine Wealth Partners, Genuine Wealth Inc.,
Yes.
which is, now the phrase you used to describe it was...
We're measuring what matters to well-being.
Right, exactly. So this measurement business, let's get right into it. It's not being done well right now, or not being done properly, or not being done completely in most parts of our society. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so can you maybe tell us a bit about that? What is it that is wrong with the conventional ways that measurement is being done?
Well, the conventional measures of progress have been focused on things like gross domestic product, and the more cash that flows in the economy, the better the GDP performs. Same as for companies. Of course, profitability is being the focus of corporate performance. And what we're saying is actually what intuitively we want is happiness and well-being. If I go on the street, I say, what do you want out of life? I want to be happy. And we're saying we can change the way we measure progress based on the science of well-being, what actually contributes to people's well-being and society's well-being.
Well, that does sound better. So in terms of social change and social responsibility, how do these issues that we have with measurement make it more difficult to do the work of social change, in your opinion?
I think some of the challenges with corporate social responsibility is that right now, a lot of the efforts are voluntary. And so how can we kind of institutionalize in the accounting world, in the stock markets, and how they look at performance in the way Warren Buffett looks at a balance sheet? How can we change the game so that we're looking at the performance of those intangible assets, relationships, trust? And these are going to be the distinguishing features of I would say, the flourishing enterprise, which has these characteristics that it's optimizing well-being, that it can report a well-being return on investment and a well-being return on assets. So I think that's what I'm trying to suggest is the future. It's going to be the distinguishing feature of good companies and great companies.
And would that also apply in like the government sphere, in these areas where people are trying to do good things and perhaps are hampered by?
That's correct. For example, with the City of Edmonton, we've introduced the Genuine Progress Indicators as a way of tracking not just GDP, but self-rated happiness, all the attributes of well-being that actually contribute to our quality of life, and building that into the budgets and the planning of cities and municipalities and corporations. Yeah. And
so do you find that in those environments under the current measurement systems, they're hampered, like they find that the things that are being measured are keeping them from really doing their work?
That's true. I think that it's a change in mindset. And this is actually, I'm going back 500 years to the roots of accounting, and the whole basis of accounting is measuring what matters to your business, to your family, to your community. So we're saying, let's go back to understanding what matters to well-being and happiness. And so the mindset has to change in honoring that intuition, that this is what we want. We all want to be happy. Mm-hmm. So let's formalize the accounting systems, the decision-making structures. So we're not ignoring profit, but we're looking at passion and our higher purpose as well, as people like Tony Shea at Zappos is arguing. So those are the new companies, I think, that get this idea of a well-being-based economy. And I think cities are starting to get on board too, and communities. In Alberta, and we've got great new young mayors in this province. So it's an exciting time to pioneer this new economy of well-being.
So what would you say happens We were talking earlier about there can be a cynicism about this kind of thing within big organizations, well-established organizations, and that does something to people. And so would you be able to reiterate what you were saying to me earlier about how that cynicism comes about, even though people fundamentally care about these other things?
Yeah, well, the cynicism comes because we're right now the game is, you keep a set of books for what purpose? For paying taxes and reporting to shareholders. So the cynical people will say, well, what you're asking me to do is way more work, way more effort. You're asking me to ask my employees how satisfied they are with their work, how meaningful their work is. You're asking me to ask the customers how you would rate the company, the level of service. And yes, these are more onerous, and the cynical person would say, why bother? I'm only trying to do my job for reporting. Under law, I have to do these things. But the progressive companies, a company we're working with now, Urban Systems, an engineering firm, has what they call a higher calling. It's called Spirit and Service for Vibrant Communities. And any company that even has this notion of a higher calling, let alone a vision, is the companies that we want to work with and shine a light on. Say, these companies get it because they understand that in the end, everything is about service, right? And how do you measure service? Can you even measure the quality of service? And these aren't easy issues to measure. No. But the basic question that we ask their clients is, would you recommend this company to your friends and colleagues in the industry? That's the only question you have to ask. Would you suggest this cafe to your friends and colleagues? I mean, we're already doing it online, and we're rating companies and hotels and all that. So this is going to be the way of the future.
Yeah, well, I hope so. So you mentioned the roots of accounting, and I know you have some good historical perspective on these kinds of things. And when we talk about, for example, that it's more difficult to measure some of these meaningful things than it is to measure just the money, that has come from somewhere. That evolved for some reason, even though, when you think about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would we only measure this one thing when we care about all these other things? So could you speak a little bit to how we got here, how that sort of, how that relates to that history? And I know, I'm sorry, but I know I have a slide on this, but I can't see.
It's Leonardo da Vinci and Luca Pacioli in front of Venice, I believe.
Right.
In front of Florence, actually.
I'm just going to ask the tech team, can you show me what slide we're on? Okay, let's go. There we are. So thank you.
Here's a portrait of Leonardo da Vinci, self-portrait apparently. But he was actually partnered up with a guy named Luca Pacioli, who is there he is. Yes. He's a Franciscan mathematician. He's a Franciscan monk, and that's his benefactor, the Duke of Florence. And it was Luca and Leonardo in 1495. They wrote the treatise, or the basis of accounting. And what Lucas said is that as in nature, so in accounting. So on the book cover, I have the Fibonacci sequence, which is the divine ratio. Debits equals credits. The whole basis of accounting is rooted in the patterns found in nature, and Lucas said that a good business person, the reason they account is that, first of all, they have to take inventory of what they have. And the household and the business were usually tied together in a guild society in Venice. So in a guild society, there was actually no such thing as profit. And to this day, there's no clear definition of profit, which is very interesting.
That is interesting.
Now, Lucas said there's no such thing as profit in a guild society, in a cooperative economy, because what we're sharing is we're sharing the bounty of our success. And if there's anything left over, it was called a residual. And that residual is either retained by the partners in that guild or dispersed to the community, given to the poor. So isn't that interesting? So this idea of profit maximization is kind of this mythology that we've kept for 500 years. But Lucas said, no, the first thing you do is you take inventory. That means you take a physical account. When I was in the accounting profession, when we went to the Honda dealership, we didn't look at the books first. We went into the yard and counted the Honda vehicles, physical inventory. Same today. What we're arguing is nothing different. We go into communities, we measure the well-being assets of a community. We ask people how happy they are, right? We, those are subjective things, but we measure how many parks there are, how many, green space and walkable trails, and what are the buildings like? What are their state of repair? Those are physical accounting protocols, and then we worry about what the value of that is in monetary terms. So the idea of a balance sheet, assets and liabilities, and equity, they make sense, right?
Yeah.
What are the strengths of your assets? What are the risks to your well-being, your liabilities? And what's the equity? What's the distribution of well-being in an organization or community? It all fits 500 years of tradition. And nothing's changed, except that we've sort of got off on this profit maximization front when we should be focusing on well-being optimization.
I'm sorry, this is off script, but can you do both? Can you have profit maximization?
Yes. We're saying there's nothing wrong with, first order, you have to make sure that your company is going to be financially resilient, right?
Right, because if that you go out of business, and then what's the point of anything?
A lot of restaurants open and close, and I think because they don't have a very good, they have an inflated notion of what success will look like. Like customers are everyone in the neighborhood is going to come to my bakery. Well, not necessarily.
Right.
And so I think we have to be, the first order is, do you have a good business plan that looks financially sustainable? And then all the other well-being attributes you can layer onto that. And when you're running a small business, it's all about relationships, right? Mm-hmm. And it's all about lifetime customer value. Mm-hmm. That's what you really want. So how do you build lifetime customer value? And it's all going to be through relationships and trust and having your staff being happy so that your clients are happy and they come back to your restaurant or your cafe. And those are things we need to pay attention to. So I think we have to have the balance: profit, passion, higher purpose.
So you're not saying don't measure the money.
I'm not saying don't measure. No. Money is money. In this world, money is still rules, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to change that. I'd like to have banks focus on well-being returns on investment and supporting well-being assets and companies that are contributing a well-being dividend to society. I would love that. And some banks, I think, are beginning to think that way.
But you acknowledge the reality that money has to be part of the equation.
Yeah,
right?
Money, say money can't buy you love, but money makes the world go around. So.
So some people, and I know I work with a lot of people who are engaged in projects to change the world, make positive social impacts, these kind of wonderful sort of heart-based things. Some people might say not everything that counts can be counted. Famous saying attributed to a variety of different people that sort of means that if you only take into account the things that are tangible or easily measurable, then you're going to miss a bunch of important stuff. But what I hear you saying is that we can actually measure those things and that we should. So how would you respond to that critique that measurement is not the be-all and the end-all, and that sometimes you just have to take it on faith?
I sometimes laugh at my own work. I say, I'm trying to measure everything that matters. And can we measure everything? No. There's some things, if you were to ask one question, I'd ask my business students, ask one question you would ask of a store owner about their happiness. What would that question be? And sometimes it's just about why am I here now? What am I doing? What gives me meaning in my life? But there is actually a science of happiness and well-being. Positive psychologists are writing about it, studying what makes people happy. And the number one issue is relationships. And so can you measure the strength of relationships? Well, you can ask questions of trust. You can ask questions of employee well-being, right? And the strength of that service relationship between client and service provider. So these things can be measured in asking the right questions. I'm not saying we don't need 120 indicators. We need a handful that are going to be materially meaningful to good corporate governance and good governance at the municipal or community level. So, but let's tie this to this. There's a science of well-being. There's psychologists know that what contributes, and the key elements are 50% is our upbringing, our genetics. 40% is our relationships. Only 10% is our money, how much money we make, and our education. So we know that, and we know what makes the happiest communities in Canada. It's a sense of belonging to your community. So all of these attributes are what guides the measurement work I do. So I just need to base it on what we already know from what people are telling us about what makes them happy.
How did they come up with those percentages? That's rather exact and interesting for something that at first glance seems so ephemeral and
it's based on the science of positive psychology, right? Looking at doing experiments and asking people and you think about it intuitively. If you've had a great childhood, They say by the time you're 8, you're already hardwired, in terms of.
That makes me nervous as a mother.
Yeah, of course. But you think about the quality of our youth, right? And then how that ultimately translates into the quality of our adult and how we are in the world. And some of us have had a bad youth, a poor upbringing. Look at First Nations people, a lot of them, and they carry that through life. So in a way, you've created this liability, but that's not that we can't overcome them. But that's what, again, if we base it on understanding that these things matter to our current and future well-being. So starting from a child, right? That and then the relationship stuff makes a lot of sense because we are hardwired to be in relationship. We're social creatures. We're naturally altruistic. We're naturally sharing and giving, even though sometimes we're told, no, like just create your own little castle and isolate yourself from your neighbors. Like, no. We actually want to be in a relationship. So that's, I'm not a psychologist, I'm an economist, so I'll keep my day job and trust the other.
Good point. Maybe that wasn't a fair question. We're going to move into talking about your model that you've developed for this measuring of these wonderful beyond monetary. I'm not going to say non-monetary, but beyond monetary. But I just want to check in with the tech people again because I know that there are some slides coming up with some charts and things, and I don't think we're there yet. But when you get to the point where you want a chart, can you just let me know, and then maybe they can help us switch to that on particular
chart now.
Yeah?
Yeah, just as a prompt.
Okay, Clayton, can we see what slide we're on, please? Thank you. So we're skipping this one?
We can.
Next chart.
Next chart.
I'm sorry about that.
There
we go. Okay.
We'll talk about that.
Okay. Apologies for that. We just are still working out some of the technical kinks here in our first webcast.
We're just having a great conversation.
Exactly. But we want to make sure that we have the visuals that you need to explain properly so that everyone can see what we're talking about. So you've come up with an actual practical tool to address this issue of the measurement systems that are in place now being somewhat limited and narrow in their focus. And it's called the genuine wealth model. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, well, tell us about the genuine wealth model.
So, the words aren't chosen lightly. So the words genuine means to live authentically according to our values. So the model is based on what do we value in terms of well-being and quality of life, based on maybe the science of well-being, but more importantly, each community, each organization will have maybe a unique set of values that guides it. And so the measurement system has to be tied to values. And when we say measuring it matters, it has to be material to our values.
Because mattering is it differs from person to person. Right. It's so subjective.
So the word genuine is a loaded word. It's not, we don't say it lightly. And sometimes we get criticized saying, how do you know that those indicators are more important than these? And I said,
more genuine. Yes.
But I don't know because I always say, do we ever ask Albertans why you love this province? And having worked in that system, knowing that I advised, ministers on well-being and indicators, and we had never asked Albertans why they love this province. So what are the values that unify us or distinguish Edmonton and Calgary, or whatever? And so if we're going to say we're measuring what matters, we need to understand
what matters.
What matters. Mm-hmm. We ask opinions about climate change and all these things, but what matters why do we love this place? Why do we stay here? Why do we want our kids to grow up here? So that's the first order of the model. The second is that there are at least what we call 5 capital assets of genuine wealth. Now the word wealth, just to back up a bit, the word wealth actually, and I didn't know this until I wrote my book, the word wealth actually means the conditions of well-being. From the Old English, 13th century Old English word. Mm-hmm. Wella, meaning well-being. The letters TH means the conditions of something.
And not money.
So health, hella, wella, right? Health, wealth, they're related. So what does that mean? That means it's not just money and material things, it's well-being writ large. So are there 5 capital assets in an accounting framework? I believe so. And they're human capital. So our health, spiritual, mental, physical, emotional well-being, our social capital, which is our relationships, trust, sense of belonging, all those squishy things that are maybe more difficult to measure, but we can ask the questions. Natural capital, which is the foundation of everything: clean air, clean water, healthy land, healthy ecosystems, right? Those things I spend my life measuring. We can measure those things. We have biologists, we have people who can verify that a wetland is healthy or a forest is healthy. And build capital, so infrastructure. We have engineers who build things, architects. How strong are those buildings? How long will the road last? All those things can be measured. And then financial capital, which is, of course, the money piece. Now, all of these are interrelated, and they talk to each other. So in an accounting framework, we can think of this new balance sheet as saying, we're looking at the conditions of well-being of those 5 assets, and there's many sub-asset classes, to the extent that we can then create a balance sheet that shows what are the assets, what is the risks of those assets, the liabilities, and what's the distribution of ownership of those assets. That's the model. And that can be applied at individual level, corporate, or municipal, national levels. And I've advised governments like China, and I'm advising Tahiti right now, on how to actually implement this model.
Tahiti's worried about their wellness?
Absolutely.
Aren't they all? I know, I'm going to say a bunch of really stereotypical things.
It's paradise.
Sunshine and,
It's paradise, but I can tell you trust has been eroded through 360 years of colonization. So for them, it's not about, they have abundant assets, but what they need to do is reconnect and re-engender trust amongst each other.
So that's an interesting point. And I remember something about this from the book also, being wealthy or financially wealthy, or having a set of conditions that people would consider envious, doesn't necessarily contribute. Like your research or your experience has shown that the connection is not necessarily there to true happiness and true genuine wealth. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
You used an example of a country. Was it Bhutan?
Bhutan has the gross national happiness policy. Yeah.
There was a country, and I should have this in my notes, but I'm asking it off the cuff. Very wealthy, small oil-rich nation. Everyone had a ton of money. Nobody was happy.
Oil-rich nation. Well, of course there's Norway. I often, people say, who's the happiest countries? Well, they tend to be the Scandinavian countries. So you have Denmark is the happiest country. It's not in Scandinavia, but you have Denmark, you have Norway, you have Netherlands, you have Canada. So it's interesting that these countries, especially Norway, which is like Alberta, oil rich, but do we know that their citizens are happy? I could tell you there are very few surveys of Albertans' happiness. So we don't even really know. No. We know we're rich.
Right, but we don't measure it.
We don't measure it. We have lots of oil. But
because people think you can't measure it, but you can.
I say, what if we did an exit interview at the Fort McMurray airport? Ask all those guys leaving every day whether their joy index increased the last week.
Ooh, that would be interesting.
That'd be a game changer.
Wouldn't represent the whole population.
No, it wouldn't.
But it would be interesting. So what about, okay, so we have this model. We can measure happiness. It's dependent on what's important to the people whose happiness is being measured, but that's reasonable. Where's the intersection with, say, corporate social responsibility? If I'm if I'm a company that's doing the usual, maybe write a check to some organizations every year, maybe set up some employee volunteering, maybe sponsor a fun run or two, and I hear about this genuine wellness model, and I want to use it to enhance my efforts. What can I do as a company, or what can a company do to implement these ideas to improve their effort to give back, be a better corporate citizen, basically?
Yeah. Well, I'll speak about the current project we're working on with Urban Systems, which is a consulting engineering firm. Western Canadian based, a partnership structure, interesting, 400 employees, but 65 partners. And they've asked us to come in, and it's called Measuring What Matters. They want to know, they already think they're a really great company, so they're already ranking in the top 50 places to work in Canada. So I'm like, that's cool. So why are they ranking that? Because there's something about their culture that suggests that their employees are happy about their workplace. But we're also asking, we're doing a client values audit. So we're saying, how do the clients perceive them, particularly around their higher callings, which is spirit and service for vibrant communities? All those words, they're loaded, right? So we say, what spirit? I don't know. What spirit? Is that the passion in which they work, the professionalism? The service piece is going to be defined by the client. So we go out to the clients and say, how are they doing in the realm of services you receive? Rate them. And then we report back to the urban team and say, here's what your clients are saying. Here's how you can improve your relationship, your service, and you distinguish yourself from your competitors based on service. Everyone talks about quality, but they're actually distinguishing themselves on service. So they're an interesting company saying, we're interested enough to have this critical self-evaluation of our clients, because for us, our business is about long-term service and long-term relationships, right? And that's lifetime customer value, as some would say in the marketing field. So that is a living example of how we're applying this. Now, the other thing we're going to do is look at the team itself, the skills, the competencies within the team to, again, optimize the level of service to their clients. And there may be different skill sets. You need an engineer, you need someone who can close a deal, you need someone who's just a good relational networker, right? Who knows how to bring donuts at the right time, right, in the relationship. So some of these things are they're intuitive, some of them, and then to formalize that into a measurement system that just doesn't track timesheets now. It's gonna create a well-being index applied to every project, every relationship they have. So that's what we're working on right now. So I can just speak about that current lived example, and I think these are applicable in any organization. What we're doing with urban systems.
And so the relationship between that and the traditional social responsibility activities is.
Well, let's talk about. So I'm a professor. I taught CSR at the U of A for 10 years until last year. Mm-hmm. And so I'm quite familiar with, a lot of the reporting is voluntary, reporting global reporting indicators, standards for sustainability reporting. So it's been a great 10 years. Like we've made a lot of progress, but I think the next level up is going to be focusing on measuring what's material to well-being. I think the problem with the CSR field is, unless it's embedded in the organization, it's in the C-suite, it's throughout the organization, and I think it is the highest expression of that is going to be this well-being moniker and metrics. Mm-hmm. So I don't see that yet. I think there's attributes of that in sustainability reports that we see, or social value reports that some companies like Van City are producing. But I think we've still got a way to go to, bring it to this well-being enterprise idea.
So we're coming from the traditional writing checks, sponsorships, and maybe a little bit of employee engagement stuff is maybe CSR version 1.0 or version 2.0.
Yeah, I'd say 1.0. Writing a check isn't going to, right? It won't cut it as much as, do the employee.
Even a giant one?
Even a giant. No, some of us want the big check, but we want the photo op, right?
When I was a fundraiser once, I had to go accept a giant check, and then I had to walk home with it in the rain.
In the rain.
And then it was in my apartment for like a month because I didn't know what to do with it. It was good for the photo op, but then, yeah. Anyway, sorry, I digress.
Yeah.
Version 1.0. We're at version 1.0. For the most part, is what you're seeing out there?
Yeah, and I think it was a CEO of Mountain Equipment Co-op, one of my favorite. I love cooperative companies because they're epitome of a well-being enterprise. But he said, if CSR.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. One of our viewers is asking what CSR is. We're rattling it off.
CSR is corporate social responsibility. Right.
Thank you very much for catching that.
Why don't we call it corporate well-being responsibility?
Ooh, CWR.
And I'm using new words like we have ROI, return on investment. What if we added W? What if we added well-being return on investment?
WROI. It sounds like a radio station.
What, can we do that? Yeah. I've just done it for two organizations, Ducks Unlimited and the BC Construction Association, to demonstrate that what these folks do is they're investing in something called a wetland. A wetland is an asset that contributes to our well-being. How does it contribute?
What do you see as being the roadblocks for folks that are interested in getting from version 1.0 to this new, more holistic well-being approach to the field of doing good? What is, like, I'm sure we're not at 1.0 because nobody cares. Obviously, we're human beings. You and I were having this conversation before. We all really fundamentally want to do good and make a positive contribution. And yet, most of us are, and most organizations are sort of stuck in what we would say is a somewhat dated model. So what do you see as the barriers to getting to this more evolved model that you're envisioning?
I think, Bob Willard, my friend who wrote The Sustainability Advantage, he said, at the end of the day, it comes down to mindset, and there's a certain inertia in the system. Like, you go to your work and you're the CFO, and you're the CFO of a company or the city, right? And all you know is to report this way. Mm-hmm. And so I understand that. It's what we're used to, it's what we were schooled in. So part of it will require pioneers, people having the courage in the C-suite, right?
What's the C-suite?
The C-suite. I didn't know what the C-suite. It's the CEO suite, right? It's the executive suite.
CEO, CFO.
So if we're not, at what levels do we have to be talking? You talk at the junior level, have that junior pioneer, suggest to the CFO, why don't we start measuring well-being? Why don't we do a well-being audit? Just like internally, just for management. And the important, the easy way here is actually through what we've forgotten is called management accounting protocol. So in management accounting, you would look at well-being as a strategic game changer. So you keep that internally, say, how do we think we're doing, like Urban Systems is doing? They're not going to be reporting out the results that we're doing to best places to work folks, but they're going to be using that for internal strategic relational management purposes. So let's start there and say, this is of strategic importance. We know this intuitively. For employees, 8% of employees in America are unhappy. No, so 8% are sort of satisfied with their general well-being.
8% are satisfied?
Only 8%. I
wish I was surprised by that.
We're not surprised, right?
No,
we're not surprised
sadly,
at all. And that's pathetic. That's costing companies money. Money is being left on the table. How? Because it's costing you money to have unsatisfied employees, right? Yeah. In Zappos, people get to decorate their desks and play guitar during the day. I don't know if we want that in every office, but the point is, you have some companies are saying, no, we know that unhappy employees cost us money. Turnover rates, retraining rates.
Presenteeism. Have you heard of presenteeism?
Presenteeism.
People show up, they're present, but they are just sort of killing time.
Yeah.
Like, they don't really.
So we know that anytime, if you have a bad relationship with the client, it's going to cost you your bottom line, right? Mm-hmm. You know that. So let's pay attention to what can improve that rating of self-happiness of employees. That's way too low. 8% is pathetic, right? Mm-hmm. And that'll be the incentive, I think, to start to make the changes that I'm suggesting. But it will take leaders. It'll take people like Ray Anderson at Interface, people like that who are willing to say, let's put a dream team together. Let's change the way we measure success, and let's lead by example. And I think my point is, look, if you start bragging about our employees, 80% are very happy with their work, and you could tell, whether it's the smile on their faces or the level of service, we can verify. We can have third-party verification going on here, right? Just like we do in the stock markets, or when you issue an IPO or whatever. So, these are the things I think that are going to distinguish the good from great companies. Mm-hmm.
There must be an element of fear, though, because if you find out, if you conduct this audit, you have to then do something.
Oh, I can tell you, the Urban Systems guys, the team leaders, they were nervous, right? Like, are you going to ask our clients? But it's like going to the teacher.
If you don't know the problem is there, you can quite cheerfully just not, but it might be a significant amount of work to respond.
But here's what we did: is we started with asking the team, what do you think they're going to tell us? Because we're the auditors. Right? We're
the team. You mean the leadership?
The leaders in Urban, so the project teams. So we asked the team leaders, what do you think, if we asked your clients this question about you, what do you think they're going to say? So first of all, we have that baseline. Mm-hmm. And then we go out to the client and say, what do you think about the level of service of Urban? Uh-huh. Now you can show, there's a gap. You guys think that the relationship's good, but actually there's a flag over here. And what you need to do, and we're reporting back to Urban. So what they need to do now is follow up with the client. It's like, we had our auditors, it's a heavy word, right? Audit.
Yeah.
Tell us these things. So we're bold enough to even ask. I mean, that's edgy, right?
Yeah.
And
Well,
you're nervous.
Scary.
And you go back to the office. What did they tell you? What did they say? I said, well, I'll tell you what they said. They said you better pick up the phone and have coffee with them next week. Right? Which is all about relationship. Yeah. Why don't you go have coffee? You're an engineer. You're maybe not a social creature, but go and have an hour chat with them. And guess what? You'll probably sell more services because they're not even aware of most of your services. Right? Those are the things. Some of these are just
intuitive. Go the other way where the leaders or the company is terrified of what they're going to hear and they're super pessimistic. And then the clients and the employees are like, oh, no, it's not that bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah. My colleague, Robert McGarvey, who works with me, he's done a lot of this work in Los Angeles for big, much bigger companies who think, oh, everything's great. The relationships, it's like, no, the train wreck. It's a train wreck coming. It's a disaster because you're not paying attention to that. The client's feelings, the trust has been broken.
But do you ever find the opposite where people are more pessimistic about what they'll hear and it turns out that or they think that they're strong in one area and weak in another and it turns out to be the opposite?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think, this is again common sense.
Our own worst critics sometimes, right?
But if as a consultant myself, I would want to know mid-course to a project, how are we doing? I ask my students this, how am I doing? Like if you're not getting what you think you signed up for this class, then please, I need your feedback. Because we can change. We can make adjustments. So a lot of this is just common sense. But sometimes we're too afraid or we think everything's fine, right? It's like, no, not necessarily.
Or we, sometimes also I find with feedback, the question is structured to only get an answer that they want to hear. Like, can you speak a little to the art of asking properly?
Oh, yeah. So the art of the asking questions. So when we ask the question, we ask them to respond to the question when you're scoring something. Where 1 to 5, where 1 is much below expectation, 3 is meets my expectations in general, and 5 is exceeds. So what we want to see is people rating in the 4 to 5 zone. So I rate you, the quality of service, above what I would expect, or above what my level of. Yeah, and we can ask the same type of questions in terms of self-rated happiness, and we do that. We did that in the town of Olds. We asked citizens to rate their financial well-being, even their spiritual well-being, like edgy questions. Yeah. How would you rate yourself from 1 to 5, where we expect people to score around 4, which means they're not super excellent, but they're certainly above average, and they're meeting what we would call a well-being expectation, and that's pretty cool. So we were showing the town of Olds that their self-rated neighborliness was below 4. It was 3.5.
Neighborliness.
So 3.5 means it's below what we think it should be. It's below 4, which is where we expect people to say, I have a relatively strong sense of belonging to my neighborhood. Oh, how about trust for businesses? Below 4. How about financial stress or financial comfort? Below 4. So again, we could see that in those proxies, there's room for improvement.
How should you, are there any, do you have any tips for people crafting these questions of what not to do? How to not, I mean, I'm picturing something really obvious like, how awesome am I? Is there errors that you see or that you would identify about like, this is what not to do when you're trying to get an accurate response or an honest response from people about their well-being?
I don't know. Sometimes questions are difficult to answer. I mean, for example, if you're going to ask the clients to, evaluate other competitors, say you're doing a restaurant evaluation, and you go and you say to a supplier of restaurants, how would you rate all of these other restaurants because restaurant X has asked us to do an audit. So some of those may feel, I mean, that's more related to a client audit. But on the personal side, I don't think the edgiest question is a question of self-evaluated spiritual well-being.
Really?
And we made that discretionary in the town of Olds because we said, like, some people maybe don't want to talk about that. But it turns out the word happiness means well-being of spirit. That's what it means in Greek. So when I ask the question, I'm serious about the real root of happiness, right? Which is the well-being of your spirit, your soul. I mean, in the Greek. So, but that question we make discretionary. So we don't force you to answer that question.
Right.
But the richness actually is in people's, if you ask an open-ended question at the end, tell us a little story about your well-being. So when I did the City of Leduc a few years ago, I asked grade 6 students, tell me a little story about why you love Leduc. And every kid wrote a little paragraph. And I could tell you that information was richer than all of the previous questions, which asked just kids to, these are grade 6 students. Mm-hmm. And so the richness is in the stories that people will tell you about their relationship.
But then that's really intangible information. Like that is that not then hard to capture in your audit?
It's hard to capture, but it pops. It makes the statistical data pop.
It's complementary.
You ask a kid, how's life in Leduc? It's like, well, I live in a trailer park, and I know who this kid is. It's because the kid lives with a single mom, right, who can't get to Walmart to work as a greeter because there's no public transit. And the kid said, I get bullied because I'm called trailer trash. That little statement, I gave it to mayor and council. Like, this kid is just one kid, but that one testimony is enough for me to go, we got to change this. Mm-hmm. So again,
then you go back to the statistics and it's supportive, right? Like they work together.
So the other thing that we do in our model is we measure both objective well-being. So like say income, or are you paying your employees a living wage? What is a living wage? Is a wage sufficient to live in Edmonton or Fort McMurray on an hourly basis? Then we ask people on the subjective side, how's your financial stress? Do you think your income is meeting your expectations? Just just a question. And what we found in OLS is there's a match. 50% of people are not making a living wage by our metrics. And a good portion, say 45% of people saying, I'm financially stressed because I don't think I'm making enough to meet my needs. Mm-hmm. So there's a matching. Or crime, right? You have crime statistics, then you have a sense of personal safety. You match those and you get an interesting harmony between the objective and the subjective.
Can we jump for a minute to the applicability of this to folks working literally in the social sector? I'm talking charities, nonprofits. Like if I'm an anti-poverty organization, for example, how do I use this?
Yeah, I could talk. In fact, one of our associates, Dominic Michaud, has just moved to Toronto. He's heading up the Global Poverty Project for Bill and Melinda Gates.
Really?
Yes. So he's a star. Like Dom's going to be taking, and I've been his mentor. He's the deputy mayor of Leduc. He's 28 years old. So we have these conversations. You're dealing with extreme poverty. You're going to solve extreme poverty, right? Well, okay. What is poverty? Well, to me, poverty is a lack of sufficient income to meet your needs. Well, what's the extreme poverty wage? Is it $2.50 an hour? Is it $2.50 a day? I don't know. And so I did some quick math and said, look, to eliminate poverty, you could pay 5.8 billion people $10 a day. That means 5.8 billion people are not making $10 a day. And you could cut one check every year of 0.5% of the wealth of the 1,700 billionaires on the planet. Now, I'm saying that would be like a quick fix, but my point is, if poverty is a lack of income, or a lack of financial capacity to meet your basic needs, how do we get people from a $1.75 daily wage to 10? What would it cost us as a society, as a redistribution of wealth? Those are the things that I love to play with. Just be provocative. I'm not saying that'll solve poverty like overnight, but we've been having this conversation about poverty for a long time. And if we don't get to the heart of it, which is the inability to have a sufficient income to meet your basic needs, then it's not a meaningful conversation.
But that's all about money. So
absolutely, where
does the broader wellness spectrum?
Because where I come in, I say, look, if you look at a basket of basic needs, a basket of well-being needs, is going to be different in Bhutan or China and Edmonton.
Yes, so, which makes the $10 figure kind of... It's
going to vary. I mean, I just said this at Harvard and Cambridge. I said, American studies are now saying about $70,000 household income is that threshold in which happiness actually tapers off. Mm-hmm. So once you've achieved that level of income, maybe your mortgage is paid off, you've achieved a level of material right? Sufficiency. So that's the question I would ask if I were to do these studies globally. Say, what is the level of enough, like material sufficiency, wherever you are? And then I'm talking about material sufficiency, clean water, access to, affordable housing, all those things. And then look at those baskets by nation, and then figure out what is a living wage. What would a living wage be in Ghana or China? And I know in China right now, I worked in China, the average wage is $2.50 an hour in China right now. To get to a living wage would be about $4 an hour. So could China move from $2.50 to $4 at a national level? I think they could. It might change the prices in Walmart.
Oh no!
But the well-being would increase in China, right?
Yeah.
That's my suggestion to China.
So you've spoken to this a little bit, but can you share with us some of your success stories? And I know if I could ask to get the slides up again, I know we have some information on that. Here we go. Sorry, we have not been using the slides as much as we expected to. Okay, Zappos.
Okay.
You have been, you've mentioned them a couple of times, and this is an organization apparently that is really applying the principles to their best advantage.
I think they are. I mean, the jury's out. I mean, in the sense of...
Well, what do they? Who are they? What do they do?
So this is an online apparel company, sells shoes, and they're $1 billion company. I think they sold to Amazon in 2009. Tony Hsieh, who a very successful entrepreneur, made it big in the IT business earlier on. $260 million sold to that company, and then joined Zappos. And what's interesting is Tony has also developed this idea called delivering happiness, which is the title of his book. And they're based in Las Vegas. And here's a company that actually focuses on the happiness of their employees and make sure that everyone feels a sense of autonomy. They have their cubicles. They can adorn their cubicles whatever they want. They could play like marimba, they can play the guitar during the day. And you think, wow, like, wouldn't you like to work there, right? And now they're actually, a good portion of their business is actually delivering happiness. They have a training facility. You can come and bring your team down and get happiness, training. So as a tongue in cheek, I don't know. I think it's a good example of what I would hope is. Now Tony says something important. He says, in our model, it's about profit, passion, and higher purpose. So you can unpack those. Are they measuring those things? I'm not sure yet. I haven't talked to Tony. I haven't gone there. But again, if that's the kind of three bottom lines, then that also relates to the urban systems example.
Which I think is our next, yes.
So we're doing this project called Measuring What Matters to the well-being of their clients and their culture.
And what do they do?
They do consulting, engineering services. So they do roads, they do pipes, they do water infrastructure, they do planning for... So
some real nitty-gritty stuff.
This is engineers. These are not, squishy, engineers. They're not fuzzy,
yeah, I do.
Squishy like economists. No. But so...
they're not a bunch of starry-eyed do-gooders.
They're not starry-eyed do-gooders, no. But, that's what's so interesting for me is I got an engineering firm, not your typical suspect. I mean, Tony's company, sure, they do flashy shoes and stuff. Mm-hmm. But so a company like that, I mean, I'm curious because they rate in the top 50 to work. They have an interesting set of values. Their values are, for example, they balance professionalism and fun, humility and courage. So they have 9 values in the middle. The central organizing values of trust down the middle. And they have a higher calling. So Tony says, good company has a higher purpose. So those are the companies I'd be looking for. So maybe I'd look at top places to work in America and the United States. So why are these companies consistently rated like Google or Boston Consulting in the United States? Why? What is it unique about their culture? If I walked in and just walked around their office, as I did in Urban, I walked around, I saw their higher calling on the wall. I walk around the office and it's open space on 105th Street and 104th Ave. And you can feel, we call it the chemistry of enthusiasm.
Almost every company has their calling on the wall, but it often doesn't
exactly
actually translate
to
much.
It's right. But I could tell you, having taught this stuff as a professor and studied this for many years, it is one company I could say is an example of what I would call a flourishing enterprise of well-being.
Is Urban Systems.
And I would say what's the next step is to formalize, right? To formalize what they're already doing well. What they do well is they build enduring relationships with clients. How do you coach the next generation? The new person that comes in out of U of A engineering, used to, as a student, you're used to performing according to some curriculum, but now you're in a culture where you're free, you're an independent, you're free to do what you do best. How do you know what your gifts are? How do you know what you do best? How do you fit into a culture that allows you to exercise your own autonomy, but yet on a platform that is engineering services? So I think that's, to me, I was thrilled when I walked in, and I met these guys through the mayor's luncheon last year, and I was talking in front of Mayor Mendel about the well-being economy for Edmonton. And I thought, why would I talk to engineers? Why would they get this?
Yeah.
And so this company is also an interesting structure because it's a partnership structure. So it's not publicly traded. So 65 partners, you're invited, and there's 400 total employees from Vancouver to Whitehorse to Saskatoon. And I feel like bragging about them because I like partnership structures. I like cooperative structures where there's a shared responsibility and a flat kind of a sense of shared ownership, right?
So let's say I'm a middle manager in whatever department, possibly community relations or CSR, in a company or an organization, a government department that's not there yet. They're still operating on the old version 1.0, or there's a distinct lack of well-being. But I'm not, in this example, I'm not the big boss. Like, I'm sort of somewhere in the middle. How can if I like these ideas and I'd like to see my organization move towards them, is there anything tangible? What steps can I take to start to maybe influence that change?
So one of the steps, I've consulted EPCOR and Suncor and a few companies in the past. And one thing I noticed was, and I was consulting on the issue of sustainability reporting. So EPCOR years ago, had sustainability department, and we're producing a sustainability report. So was Suncor. But what I saw was the different departments had actually never sat down together. They'd never integrated their information systems. So I thought, well, why don't we get the HR person and the CFO and in the same room, and let's talk about this collectively. So let's start there. Let's start with, because the HR people, I know they get this. Like, that's what they live and breathe, right? The CFO is like, I'm just trying to produce financial statements so their shareholders are happy and the markets understand how we're doing. Mm-hmm. Which, fine, just keep that. But for management accounting, strategic accounting purposes, or strategic purposes, we need that team to come together. Right now it's CSR. Let's call it corporate well-being responsibility, or corporate well-being. We have a team that actually, given the talents that they bring to the table, will actually collectively achieve what I'm suggesting, which is a culture of well-being.
So as this hypothetical middle manager, what I need to do is perhaps start to make connections with other parts of the organization, or bring this up in conversations with the connections that I already have. And
suggest that this is of strategic importance to the company to maintain. If I say customer lifetime value, what does that mean to most people?
That would mean, well, I guess being cynical, it would mean the amount of money you're likely to get out of somebody.
If I'm a restaurant owner, I want that couple coming in every Monday night and buying fettuccine Alfredo because they love my fettuccine Alfredo.
Right.
That's what it means to me, very simply. So I want a customer for life.
Right.
Right? If that's what I would think as a small business person. Mm-hmm. So how do I achieve that? How do I know when that relationship is getting eroded? How do I know that requires that my staff are happy? So there's this constant checking about the strength of the relationship, right? That I'm having the internal strengths, relationships inside, but also externally. And I think that will give you a comparative advantage over others.
Now we have another question from the viewers. Are you saying the group of people who don't make a living wage are the same group of people who said they experience financial stress? Without more data, I would argue you can't make that assumption. You can be a very high earner and still experience significant financial stress due to your spending habits and expectations. So how would you respond?
Colette's asking that question.
Yes, Colette's asking that.
I would agree with Colette. This is a very rudimentary perspective on. But if I ask that person who said, I experience financial stress, to also say something about their wage, we actually have their income data, so we could start to do some fun correlation between. And it's not entirely true. The person that says our household makes $200,000 may also say, I don't think I make enough, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a complex question. But as an economist, I'm still curious about what percentage of the population is statistically not making a living wage, because that gives me some idea of a degree of financial stress that it would be experienced by those people.
So is it that broadly people who are not making a living wage are just more likely to say that they're experiencing financial stress, as opposed to them being, they're not the only ones, but there is a sort of a causal effect there?
Because I'm looking at what are the stressors in life, what are the risks to well-being, and I would say financial stress is one of the biggest ones we all experience. So that's why I'm just looking for proxies for that degree of stress. But it's true that a lot of people, I mean, happiness and money, it's a sliding scale, right? Like, let's face it, we covet the next next technology or the neighbor's car or whatever it is. We are also hardwired that way. So the money happiness relationship isn't as smooth and perfect as I think. We don't want to be flip about these things, but honor the fact that we have these complexities in our behavior. And
so I might say that Colette's point actually reinforces your greater argument, which is that having as much money as you perhaps could does not necessarily drive overall well-being.
Right.
So as she's saying, just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean you're not overspending and causing yourself stress, which is probably related to some of your other deficits in well-being. Like, people overspend for a reason, right?
Well, and I think one of my points is some people say you should be a personal well-being coach. And I'm like, why? Well, in our own experience, in our own household, like, we eliminated our debt. And then what I realized as a business person, I said, wait, if I don't have the mortgage to pay anymore, whatever it is, monthly payments, then I have discretionary, what do I have now? I have the potential for discretionary time to spend doing things. Instead of having to make billable hours to make the mortgage payment, I now have some discretionary time. So I can buy a bigger house, sure, I can buy more stuff and fill up that expenditure void, or I can self-regulate and write a personal business plan that I'm living on less income than I did when I left government in 1999, right? It's like, how could you do that?
Yeah.
Well, because we don't have the same expenditure and debt stress. Now, can I coach people that way? Absolutely. I'm happy to do that. I do that a lot. But it doesn't mean take my path. Well, what about investments? Most people aren't very good at money management. Where are you investing your money? Are you investing it in equity, genuine equity that's in your community, or you're investing it in stocks that you have no relationship with? So you start to rethink your whole personal household budget around well-being, right? And say, where am I spending my money? When I spend money, I make a choice. I make a value statement about what I like, right? What I want to support. And so we're powerful when we make those choices. So whether it's your cash expenditure, your daily household needs, or it's your investment choices, we can start to customize that also to well-being, right? And you can get, I create all kinds of crazy spreadsheets, full cost accounting, I write off my espresso machine in 6 months because I don't go to Starbucks every day, right? So weird things like that drives my wife crazy. But I love doing that kind of, because for me, it makes me comfortable that I can go to sleep at night going, we're on a good financial path, we're sustainable, we're happy, and we're debt-free, and and yet we have this discretionary time, which is the most precious thing that we have. So. And
on that note, since we're nearly out of time, I think we're going to wrap up. I want to thank you for being here today. Thank you all for joining us as well. Again, this is Mark Anielski, and his book is The Economics of Happiness. So Maybe you want to pick it up. Maybe you want to take a read. I did. It's very interesting. Or take it out of the library, which is
libraries are awesome.
What I actually did. And so next month, on April 24th, our guest will be Professor Matthew Grimes from the Alberta School of Business. And we'll be talking about waste. Waste not, want not, and the competitive advantage in your trash pile. How you can be both sustainable and ethical and socially responsible while also driving profits. So join us for that. We will be sending out a follow-up link to all of you with links to everything that Mark has talked about, his company, his business, the companies that have been mentioned in the resources that we've been talking about, and also the link to register for next month's free webcast if you would like to. My name again is Nadine Riopel. I'm the director of the Center for Social Responsibility here at the International Institute for Innovation, and I hope to see you again. Thanks for joining the conversation.